Hi, welcome to Pondering Passages. I'm Curt Austin. My good friend David Mullins is going to be with us shortly, and we're going to be talking about Psalm 15 today. You will not want to miss this. It's got the potential of being a life-changing, life-altering, life-affirming discussion. So come back, be a part of the conversation, and we will talk about it together. We'll see you then. Welcome to Pondering Passages. I'm Curt Austin. My good friend David Mullins, right there.
I'm right here.
Right there every time. He's right there.
I'm on the
or sometimes
I'm
over
on
there.
the other side this time. Yeah.
Yeah, we moved around. So we are today talking about Psalm 15. What do you think about Psalm 15, Dave? Oh, wait.
Yes.
There were two things I wanted to
Yes.
say before we started today.
All right.
Number one,
One.
we've kind of lost this in our discussions each week. We read the same passage every day. We then come together and talk about it. And we have been doing this now for over 2 years. And the goal of it is not for information. The goal of this practice, the goal of this discussion is for formation. And I think we've forgotten to bring that up.
So, what would you say the difference is between information and formation?
Well, the formation is how, information, you can read it and go, well, it was written when they were in the exile, and some people think it was written by this, and this is for the purpose, versus how does that speak to me? What's my response to this passage? How do I interpret that for my own life, and what do I think God is telling me in that? That's what I think. Is that close?
Well, I ask, what do you think? And so there's no wrong answer.
So tell me what the right answer is.
Yeah. No.
Anyway,
I think that's yeah. What's this?
Yeah.
What's this passage asking of me?
Yeah. And I think this is the reason why, as I was reading Psalm 15 this week, that really stood out.
Really?
It's a formative.
Okay. Well, I can see that. Yeah.
It's a formative passage, and it really does speak to how am I responding to what God is saying in this passage. And it was just a reminder that I don't think we've strayed too far from that, but it's a good reminder to anybody who might be watching this, and for ourselves. So,
what's the second thing? You said two things. Was that the first thing, or was that both things?
The first thing was that we read it every day.
Okay.
Just to remind everybody, this is what we do.
And when you're talking about formation, yes, I think this passage especially speaks to that.
Yep. So it is a Psalm 15, a psalm of David, and so it's very short. So we have it all on one slide.
Oh, and I should say I like the short psalms, not because you can read through them quickly, but because you can dive down, I think, a little deeper in the time that you have.
Yeah, I agree. I think it makes a big difference. So if we kind of just start, verse 1, who may worship in your sanctuary, Lord? Who may enter your presence on your holy hill? I was reading through this today, and I read it every day, and I read your holy grill. And I don't know why my brain did that, but
wow,
verse 2, I was looking at my grill this morning. Those who lead blameless lives and do what is right speak the truth from sincere hearts. Those who refuse to gossip or harm their neighbors or speak evil of their friends. Verse 4, those who despise flagrant sinners and honor the faithful followers of the Lord and keep their promises even when it hurts. Verse 5, those who lend money without charging interest and who cannot be bribed to lie about the innocent, such people will stand firm forever.
Yeah.
That's a great psalm. I've got it tattooed on my lower back now. I mean, this one really worked for me. It's tough to read from back there,
Yeah,
but
it would be. Yeah.
So what do you think, Dave? What did this do?
Well, I mean, it's a good question. One of the things I came away with is, uh, they're not sure exactly how this psalm was used. It might have been used when people were entering the temple. It might have been used in a time of worship. But I think the question is one to ask. How do we prepare to enter into
Yeah.
God's presence? Because that's really what it's talking about. I mean,
Yeah.
it's talking about sanctuary, but in their day, the temple, the sanctuary was the place where heaven and earth met. That's where God's presence literally was. And so, who may enter your presence on your holy hill? I think that might have been talking about Jerusalem.
Hmm.
I mean, I
Hmm.
didn't read that anywhere, but Jerusalem was always, you always go up to Jerusalem even if you
Right.
go down.
Right.
But asking the question, who may worship in your sanctuary, who may enter your presence? And the question is, how do we enter into God's presence? Is that something we think about?
Hmm.
Actually, I was going to confess that, during this sabbatical, I've been on sabbatical for 4 months, about ready to end, and we've attended different churches. A lot of times we attended online because I hate going to a small church because people get excited. Oh,
Yeah.
visitors. No, not,
Visitors.
yeah, I am a visitor, but just for today. So don't get too excited that, oh, some new people showed up.
You didn't get signed up for nursery work or anything, did you, on any of those churches?
Well, yeah, but I wasn't going back, so they'd figure it out.
That's
Uh,
that's hilarious.
but we watched some online, and so when I was reading this, I thought, how did I show up to those events? Now, that's not just where God's
Ooh.
presence is, but it is a time set apart for worship. And I would say, I did not show up in the way that this psalm was really uh, asking of me. I mean, I just showed up. I didn't think about what we were about ready to do until we were doing it.
That is, talk about formative. That is a great challenge. I mean, so if I put myself in, if I run down my schedule,
Yeah.
say, and I say Sunday morning, or do I just turn on the TV? Because we also watch online, and I just turn on the TV and sit down, plop down, and wait for YouTube to fire up. Or do I have any preparation before I walk in to that space?
Yeah.
Wednesday night, Thursday night with our small group, Wednesday night with our BFG group, but even more. I'm thinking, my wheels are turning even more. What about the time that I'm spending even in the morning as I'm reading, as I'm praying for my list of my prayers? Am I actually entering into that in a way of preparation for what God may want to say to me?
Yeah. And even beyond that, and again, this is where the formation comes. The psalm might not really speak to that question, uh, but that is one of the questions is asked of me actually this morning. So it's
Mm.
still fresh because what the psalmist is pointing to it isn't the fact that I'm preparing for that time. The psalmist is really talking about a lifestyle.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
it's kind of like, yeah, anyone can prepare for worship, but the psalmist brings that not to that moment before we enter into it, but a whole, how are you living your life? Are you living your life in such a way that you can enter into God's presence, into sanctuary, and really be in God's presence?
I mean, let's take
And
let's take
that
verse
starts in
verse
verse
two.
2. Yeah.
You just start, just let's just take,
Yeah.
okay, as part of the formative, and I take verses 1 where the question is asked, and then verse 2 where he starts to answer the question. And if I
Right.
just stopped there, if I could just knock those who lead blameless lives and do what is right, speaking the truth from sincere hearts, if I could do that, man, I'd be a different person.
Yeah, I think we all would. And I think that's the part of the thing of the psalm. It really kind of fans out from verse 2.
Yeah.
And we'll, I think we'll swing back around, but verse 2 is really kind of like me, and then it talks about neighbors or friends, and then it kind of goes beyond
Hmm.
that. It
Hmm.
continues to go
Hmm.
beyond just me and how I interact with those around me, but it all really starts with verse 2.
Well, go in then to verse 2, 3, 4, because it does it's concentric circles right there. I mean, you've got this
Yeah.
center of how I live, my personal, the state of my heart.
And,
Um,
and I could even see verse 3, 4, and 5 actually defining verse 2. What does it mean to live a
mm,
blameless life? What does it mean to do right? What does it mean to speak the truth from a sincere heart? Well, it means that you don't gossip, you don't harm your neighbor, you don't speak evil of their friends, not just your neighbors, but their friends. Can you believe the people who came over to their house last night? Man, what a motley crew. No.
I love that group.
I'm sure you do. It, and so it's almost giving you the definition of who it is that may enter into God's presence.
One of the things that stood out to me, Dave, as I read this is, um, so who may worship? I think it's a posture. It's a posture of your heart. It's a posture of your um, your spirit. But it also, at least in our context, is how we are praising God, right? Um, how do we do that? Um, so if you look then, who may worship? But then verse 2 is speaking. So you have the speaking, the
Right.
truth. Verse 3, no gossip, speak evil. Verse 4, keep their promises, right? So
Well, and
you've
honor.
spoken a promise, and well, I'm just thinking
Honor.
of the
Yeah.
using the mouth. Yeah, honor.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
honor.
honor. Yeah.
And then even number 5, those who cannot be bribed. So you're withholding a lie.
To
You're
lie. Yeah.
not using that. And this whole thing is about how we speak and what we
So,
say and how we're engaging that.
there's a couple questions I have. Uh, it says those who cannot be bribed to lie about the innocent. What if you just lie about the innocent without being bribed? Or what if you despise flagrant sinners, but not the ones that aren't so flagrant about it?
Well, or turn that around. You don't despise those who are not so flagrant about it, right?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
Sinners, you let them have a pass,
yeah,
right?
yeah. But the flagrant ones, no, I'm going to despise those.
It's just it's I think, and I think we've even talked about it on this, is that one of the things that I've been trying to do is really change my the amount of words I use when I choose to speak and when I choose not to. And I had for a long time, I had a little sticky note on here that said, "Keep your mouth shut." Just
And
you don't have.
we have all appreciated that.
So you've got that. I mean, seriously, everybody does appreciate that.
That's true.
You know,
Yeah.
everybody does appreciate that if you keep your
What's the
mouth shut.
proverb? I wish I would have looked the proverb up. It's better to remain silent and thought a fool than to speak up and remove all doubt. I
Yeah.
think Mark Twain kind
Mhm.
of riffed off of that proverb. So a lot of
Mhm.
people think, "Oh no, it's Mark Twain that said that." Actually, it's you can find that in the Proverbs.
But I think this passage is it is the parallel to that proverb.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and what's the then what's the ups not the upside? What's the resulting action of being able to speak truth from our hearts, keep gossip away, all of those things, is that we get to enter in the presence of the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
I mean, Grail. I mean, Hill.
Hill. Yeah. Holy Grail. Yeah. And And God is gracious and God accepts us as we are. But I think that a lot of how we live creates barriers and obstacles, not on God's side, but on our side.
Mm.
Uh, it's almost like we're putting up walls as we, if we go against what the psalm is saying, we're putting up walls. And so I, and I can't prove it any way at all. But I think those that live like this, when they enter into that time of God's presence and worshiping God, it's a different experience. And
What do you mean by that? Can you flesh that
well,
out a little bit
Paul
further?
talks about God is not mocked, for a person reaps what they sow. And I think we keep trying to live a life where we don't want to reap what we sow. And what the psalmist is saying is sow a certain way of living, and what you reap will be much different. But what we want to do is we want to live however we want to live, and we want to say what we want to say, and we want to go against all this. And then we think, oh, my experience of God is going to be exactly the same as someone who lives like this. And I see that, when I read of the saints and even monks and nuns, those that are fully given over to God, their experience of God, I think, is much deeper and richer than those that just basically say, well, God will forgive me, which God does. But yet there's just these places in our lives that I think we've created these barriers. Again, not on God's part, but on our part, because we basically said, I don't care what God says about how I live. I'm going to live how I want. And God's like, okay. But I don't think we recognize what all we forfeit when we take that sort of attitude.
Interesting. That's a great insight. I think, and I agree. I think this passage is saying, you can live however you want.
Right.
You can be the antithesis to verses 2 through 5 if you want.
Yeah.
But you won't stand firm forever.
Right. Which is the very last line of this
Mm-hmm.
psalm. Such people that are living the way that the psalmist outlines, such people will stand firm forever.
Oh, by the way, verse 5. Can I have $1,000? I mean,
I
borrow.
don't know. Can you
I meant borrow.
borrow?
Oh my goodness. Not bribe to lie about the innocent. I wonder,
Yeah.
and that was the only thing I walked away from this. And I thought, when I read this week, verse 5, and who cannot be bribed to lie about the innocent. Is that a modern day thing? Do you think? Have you often been asked to be bribed? To lie about innocent people and been bribed in some way?
I haven't, but sometimes you hear things that happen and it's like, how in the world are these people saying these things? Because they know they're
Mm.
not true. And maybe, you can be bribed with more than money. Maybe you can be bribed with power.
Okay, all right, that
You know,
helps.
yeah. One hand washes the other. And you hear it, I mean, a lot in politics that, some politicians will do stuff that they think is wrong because they can get something else that they believe is passionately about through. And so that's how we kind of end up with some of the, you hear a bill that's supposed to say, feed people. And then there's some weird thing in there that has nothing to do with feeding people. Well, they stuck that in there. So,
Okay, that makes a lot of
yeah.
sense. Thank you. That helped put that into a context that I could understand better.
Again, and that kind of goes back to verse 4, keep their promises even when it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
The psalmist recognizes that sometimes our promises are difficult to fulfill
Yeah.
because when we made them, things are not this, things change.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably something we could spend, a whole episode on, because there's been situations where you say something and then the circumstances change.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, yeah, I thought I could loan you that $1,000, man, but then my car broke down.
Yeah.
What do you do
Yeah.
about that?
Oh, that's great.
Do you keep that promise? Or it's like, I'm going to have to back out of that. I hate it. And again, these are not easy things. I think sometimes we look at stuff like this and it's like, oh yeah, I won't speak, I won't gossip, I won't harm my neighbor.
Mhm.
But this psalm has some teeth when you really step back and think about it.
Ooh,
And
that's
the
a good
psalm knows
advice.
it. That's why it says even when it could have just said keep your promises, but
Even when it hurts. I
even when
like
it
that,
hurts.
Dave. This psalm has teeth.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a
Yeah.
bumper sticker for sure. We'll sell that on the Pondering Passages marketplace.
Yeah.
This psalm has teeth. Well, this has been really helpful for me to kind of think about this with some of what you've been saying and just
Yeah, I
bringing this
appreciate,
background.
your insights as well.
This has been
I
a
think
fun read.
yeah, and one of the things, if you haven't ever watched us before, we encourage you to find a friend or even an enemy, a neighbor, someone. It's like, hey, let's sit down and talk some of this out because it is helpful. It's helpful to get other perspectives.
And honestly, that is true, Dave. I mean, even if it's I wouldn't, maybe it's too far to say neighbor or enemy, but I mean, somebody who has a completely different perspective on it
Yeah,
doesn't mean
yeah.
that they're wrong and you're right. It may be that they've actually, God's given them an
And
insight that you would have never thought about.
and that's one of the differences between formation and information. With
Mhm.
information, you could be right or wrong. That's wrong. It
Yeah.
wasn't used for this. It wasn't written at that point. That person didn't write it. But when it's formational, it's like, this is how God used this psalm in my life. And
Mhm.
this is what I hear God speaking to me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I like it. I like it. Well, thank you for joining us this week. Next week, we will come back. We'll be reading every day Psalm 16, and we will come back then and talk to each other about that. And we'd love for you to join us on ponderingpassages.com or on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, and you can look all of those things up. There we have mostly Psalms, but we also have a little bit about Ephesians, and we have a little bit about Luke and
And share our podcast. I know a lot of people are listening to podcasts these days, and feel free to share that. Share all of this stuff.
Pondering Passages, the podcast. So
Yes.
you'll see those coming out too. All right. Well, Dave, thank you so much for another great week, and we will see you back here, same time, same place, same channel.
Yes.
All right. All right. We'll see you then. Goodbye, folks. Yeah.
It might be better not to work and not to try to maximize whatever retirement we have, because you always try to balance that out,
Right.
life and then finances, because I might die at 70, I might die at 67 or 61 or 57. You never know. Yeah, listen to you.
Am I in your will?
You know what? We went through that not too long ago. I don't know that you are.
I can't believe it.
Well,
Nothing. Not even a little star sky thing that you're projecting there on the back wall. Nothing.
I could leave that to you.
Hey, you know
I'll
what?
leave you all my lights.
Speaking that I gave to you.